Hi folks, Mr. Long here. I'm going to go through the solutions on our first evaluation, and I'm going to explain what you have to do to earn full marks. Okay, so please be conscious of what I'm saying about earning full marks, because some of you got 9.5, right? You got a level 4 plus and you just forgot one little thing. Okay, so I'll try to highlight some things as I go through and speak to them. All right, so first one. The question asks for what is the domain between B and C dollars. You must set up and solve an inequality. Include a number line and interval notation in your answer. Okay, the equation is given as negative 4x plus 247. This is money in a piggy bank. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, the first part here is to set up and solve. So we've set up and solved an inequality here. I'll just maybe make a dot there. The amount of money has to be between 171 and 195. So that's setting up the inequality. Then over to the right, I've shown the bed mass and inverse table. Following that, I solve the inequality step by step. So the 195, if I look down there and look down there, there's where I'm applying inverse operations. Minusing 247 to both sides of the inequality, and then dividing by negative 4 to get x between 13 and 19. Remember that when we divide by a negative, in this, in that part, that the inequality signs switch. Then it says that you have to finish up with, excuse me, an interval. And because it's between, it's open circles. So there's our interval statement there, and then we should have a number line as well. Okay, so that's what you need for full marks, to have all of those, and have all of those correct. Okay, and remember it's round brackets because it's between. Number 2, a person is out for a run, and we are given these ordered pairs where this is the x value here, and that's time in seconds, and this is the y value, or f at x, and that is their distance from an origin. Distance from an origin. Not how far they've ran, but their distance from the origin. Okay, and as it turns out, many of you figured out the equation of the line that way. At 0 seconds, now you didn't have to figure this out, but at 0 seconds they were at the 1 meter mark. In other words, they didn't start at 0 meters, they actually started their run at the 1 meter mark. That's important, that's significant. Okay, so first part A is to come up with the equation. So you had to figure out the slope, showing your work, and then put it into an equation. Some of you figured out that it was 5x plus 1 using the methods that you learned in grade 9 and 10. You could go directly to the 5 bracket x minus p, or sorry, m x minus p plus q, because it's fairly obvious from this that when x equals 7, y has to be 36. So if we look at the equation, if you think about it, if you put a 7 in here, if x equaled 7, you'd have 7 minus 7 plus 36. So 7 comma 36 is on the graph, and the slope is 5. Okay, or 5x plus 1 was acceptable as well, if you use the traditional ways of finding out the equation. Part B says, sub in 23 to the equation, find f at 23, and explain what it means. So I've done that here. I substituted in 23 for x. The answer turns out to be 116. Then it asks you what that means. So what it means is that at 23 seconds, they're 116 meters away from the origin. It is not correct to say they ran 116 meters. That 116 meters away is a location. The y value, or f at x value, gives the distance from the origin. In fact, they've ran 115 meters because they started at 1 meter. Okay, so that gives you a location, not how far they've run. Okay, part C. We have to set f at x equal to, the equation equal to 400, and solve for x. So right there. That shows setting the equation up, setting the equation equal to 400. And then I've got a bed mass and inverse table. And I solve and get 79.8. It doesn't say anything about real life. You just have to solve for x. Okay, the last one is solving quadratic inequalities. So here's the first one. 50 minus 18x squared. So you have to, it says to factor, sketch, and state your answer. Factor, sketch, and state your answer. So the first thing in this case that we should be doing is a common factor. I see that both of those numbers are even. And I also notice that it looks like a difference of squares because there's a minus and then there's two terms. So that's usually a difference of squares, but 50 is not a square number. If I common factor out a 2, which means I'm dividing all the terms inside by 2, the 50 becomes 25, the negative 18 becomes negative 9. Now, can you factor negative 2 out of this so it looks like the x will come first? Sure you can. But you just have to remember that originally there was a negative in front of the x squared. Now we have a difference of squares. 25 is a square, 9x squared is a square. So square root of 25, 5. Square root of 9x squared, 3x. And then it's minus and plus. Okay, the formula is up above here. A minus b, a plus b. Now a lot of you here, when you went to graph it, you just let the x-intercept be 5. But remember that, and I'll write this down here. Remember that 5 minus 3x equals 0. So we would minus 5 from both sides and divide by negative 3. So x would equal 5 over 3, but x would also equal negative 5 over 3. Okay, you have to solve for the zeros by zero factor property. Okay, whoops. So that means the x-intercept is on the left side there, on the right side there. It's opening down because there was a negative in front of the x squared. The inequality states we're supposed to find out when it's above the y-axis, the x-axis. So the yellow part indicates what's above the x-axis. So when y is above the x-axis here, x is between these two values. Open circles because it's greater than, okay? Greater than 0. All right. And then this represents our interval where that's true. If x stays between negative 5 over 3 and 5 over 3, y will be above the x-axis. Okay, you must factor, common factor in this case first, do a difference of squares, make your graph, and write your final answer for full marks. Okay, for this one here, x squared minus 7x minus 18 is less than or equal to 0. The two numbers, this is a simple, we call this a simple trinomial. Okay, it's not a perfect square. So x squared minus 7x minus 18 is less than or equal to 0. So it multiplies to negative 18. It adds to negative 7, the two factors. Okay, what are those two numbers that multiply to negative 18 and add to negative 7? Since it multiplies to a negative, I have both a negative and a positive. Okay, but which one should be bigger? Well, the negative is bigger because it adds to a negative. So the two numbers are negative 9 and positive 2. So what some of you did is immediately plotted negative 9 and positive 2 as your x-intercepts. But that's not true. That's what goes in your factors. Okay, so then we sketch. If x minus 9 is a factor, by zero factor property, if I want to make the right side word 0, what is the x-intercept? It's 9. If x plus 2 is a factor, then negative 2 is an x-intercept. Now this one says less than or equal to 0. That means the y value is below the x-axis. That's been highlighted in yellow. So when the y value is down here, it's below, that means the x value has to remain in between negative 2 and 9. And this time it's square brackets because it's less than or equal to. Okay, and the third one is a perfect square. Okay, in the perfect square form, we have a plus b squared. So, and if this right here, this could be plus minus, and that would also be a minus there. Okay, so first thing I need to do is I look at this and I think, okay, 25, that's a square. 4, that's a square. So I need to check and see if it follows the formula, because I've got squares at the start and the end. It has to have 2ab in the middle, so I double check it. So the square root of 25 is, or 25x squared is 5x. The square root of 4 is 2. So I double check that. So it becomes 2 times 5x, that's 10x, times 2 is 20x with a minus sign in between. Perfect. Minus 20x, minus 20x. It is a perfect square. Okay, the middle term has to be worth 2ab. So how do I write this? Well, it's equal to a plus b squared, or a minus b squared if there's a minus in the middle. So since there's a minus sign on the middle term, it becomes a minus b. And that's squared. That's greater than or equal to 0. I'm supposed to sketch it. So how do I get the x-intercept for that? 5x minus 2 equals 0. Add 2, divide by 5. The x-intercept is 2/5, but there's only one of them because it's a repeated, we call this a repeated root to the equation. Okay, there's only one of them. It just touches the x-intercept because there's only one x-intercept on a parabola. Now the question is, when is it greater than or equal to 0? Well, it's greater than or equal to 0 for every single x value. Okay, every single x value. Okay, and so what is our final answer? X belongs to the real numbers. Doesn't matter what x is, the y value is always going to return an answer that's either positive here or 0. Okay, x can be anything. And that, folks, is your solution set to earn full marks.